Hi, Ben here from Supercoach Insider, bringing you my team in February. It's the Road to Round 1 series. It's been a little while, so thank you for all these shout-outs and blessings as well. Had a baby 8 days ago now, so I'm just trying to get my head around all of that. So I thought I'd do my team series, and I think Chris is doing his this weekend, and Swiss isn't far behind. Although, let's face it, Chris does one every 2 weeks, so yeah, no surprise there. But for me, the last one, things have changed a little bit for me as far as the team and the structure, mainly around rookies. Now, normally this time of year, you hear quite a lot of rookies and ones that are coming through, and some pop up late, and I'm really hoping that's the case. But if I haven't heard much about them now, I get a little bit concerned, especially with the whole sub ruling this year, so that's why I'm thinking of changing things a little bit. But before we move on, SC Insider 100, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Please do keep up the love shout out and let us know what you think, and if you're thinking something similar for this series. All right, going on to my team now. I did actually come up with one, and it's a little bit more risky. Now, the risk is in my defensive line, mainly because I think that's where a lot of the value is. There's still a lot of great value in that midfield, but the difference is I don't want to be paying many $600,000 defenders who I can't really VC or see, whereas I'd much rather be paying $630,000 for a Bontempelli or some other player that I might actually be able to VC or see, and spending up big for at least a few players in that midfield. And that's the difference. So there is some good value in that midfield mix, and I'll talk about that as well. But I'm kind of trying to cover a few bases. Forward rookies look fairly bleak at the moment. Again, I'm hoping everything sort of changes. But as far as, and again, I'll go through this in a little bit, and there's two different ones that I'm looking at, so I might go through both of those briefly. The first one is Tom Stewart hasn't left my side. Same thing as I've spoken about before. I know he doesn't play too many home games in the first sort of, 10 rounds or 11 rounds, but he does score extremely well, basically the same at the MCG, and they play 5 of those in the first 11 anyway. So I'm really happy with him. His role's not going to change. He's still the extractor, and I still see him doing very well. He's also, I think, the highest averager for the last 2 years in defense. So I don't think you can go too wrong, to be honest. Except for possible injuries and the rest of it, but he hasn't left my side. And the next one is, and I've been on him for a while, and Chris used to give me a whole bunch of grief, Elliot Yeo. Now, I said if Elliot Yeo's fit, etc., he's definitely someone that I'd be willing to start in my team. Looks like Chris and a few others now starting to come with that fold, but he's getting some CBAs. I think they had the West Coast first their seconds. He was in the CBA for the very start of the game. Now, on top of that, he is still getting time in defense, but more importantly, when he's going back into defense, he's actually getting kickouts as well. So he's been able to knock out a few kickouts, which wouldn't be as surprising, except for the fact that he was actually sharing a defensive line with Hearn and Witherden, who are both notorious kickout players. He actually was taking some kickouts when he was in defense instead of Hearn or Witherden. So I think that's an extremely big plus and a tick for me. So I'm really keen for him. Normally, you might have him a little bit further down, but the issue I have at the moment is I don't really want to pay $600,000 for a player. And if I was, it'd be Dawson or Doherty, right? And I'll probably explain that in the next part. I'm not sure I'm sold on Dacos, although rumor is I think today he played, match sim pure midfield. So I want to see it before I kind of get sold on. I think a lot of people are jumping on. Everyone's saying natural development. So I have looked at possibly being able to handcuff him and maybe even a Young, but I still want to see it. So I'm not really sold on many $500,000 players, especially when you flag up, say, a Green or someone in that midfield who will definitely average you more for a similar price. And I might get into that next part. But Elliot Yeo is that next one there for me. I have had Hunter in my side for quite a while. Bose is now coming into my side for the sheer fact that M or Supercoach Mamba came out and said that pretty much the talk from, I think it was Stewart and from Jeremy Cameron is that Bose hasn't really missed a training session. So it's kind of the quiet achiever. Geelong just ticking about their business. So apparently he's fit, hasn't missed any sessions, and possibly might be getting some midfield time. So that kind of then ticks off. Okay, well, if he's fit and he's been training, then he's now back into that mix for me. I am still watching Hunter Clark, but he's kind of gone off my radar a little. I'm still waiting for it. So for me, Hunter Clark, he wasn't training in defense, hasn't had match sim or anything in defense. He was spoken about by the assistant coach as far as the working with the assistant coach as far as the midfield craft. So I was like, sweet. Did get noticed, I think, by Saints TV, so on YouTube, about he was fairly impressive in some of the drills, etc. in the midfield. And then the defensive line did a whole bunch of repeated sprints to finish their session, just defense. And Hunter Clark wasn't a part of that. So that tells me that he's probably in that midfield mix and trying to give them something else going forward. But then some match him today, no one even mentioned him. So I don't know if he was rested or if he's just kind of gone a bit quiet. But I still am interested in him for 300,000. But what has actually changed is there is someone else who I was kind of looking at briefly, and that's Caulfield. Now, word is today he was wearing a hat because he's still, I think, not contact. So maybe taking it a little bit easy as far as those that can hit him. But it looked like he was actually that free kind of intercept sort of attacking defensive player. Now, Ross Lyon loves those type of players. And if he's the guy that's free to kind of take some intercepts, etc., then that is worth a lot of points. And because he's only 208,000, he then kind of comes into that mix for me instead of Hunter Clark. Again, could change. Bose could turn into Hunter Clark, and I could leave him out if he's not kind of getting the right role. This is just sort of how I'm sort of lining up. And the next one is Jinby. Now, again, a defensive player, highly spoken about recently, been actually getting some midfield time as well in match sim, which I think is just valuable. And he's in my side. Hasn't left my side for a lot of it. Now, the one that has kind of changed is defensive rookies took a little hit, mainly because I think it's the Fremantle rookie and one of the West Coast rookies, so Chesser, or the other one. I'm probably tossing up between the two, maybe for cover. If Jinby can then go into the midfielders cover, that's sort of what I would be considering if one of those plays. But Connor McKenna wasn't really in my side because I was talking about Wilmont and all Rich and all these other players being on halfback, right? And I was a little bit concerned. He was in the best team as well as Wilmont. However, McKenna was probably a little bit more impressive, was halfback flank and pushed up onto the wing in the first team. So that kind of gives me enough assurances that he's probably getting a fairly good role. Rayner as well playing the defensive line. So there's so many defenders in that mix. And I just think Wilmot might be the sub or the guy that kind of misses out at some point. So he's now out of my side, Wilmot, but I am still watching him. Then Weedle, who I have had... has been on my field, and I don't mind him being on field at this point in time. I still want to see his scoring potential, etc., but I haven't minded him on there. And the other one to come in is Cowan. So, if I could spell, Cowan for Carlton. So apparently today, I think that was spoken about, he did really well on the defensive line. Zach Williams did an ACL. Oleg Markov was looking to possibly get there. Collingwood swooped in kind of like an ex-girlfriend that went and goes on a date, and then all of a sudden like, oh, no, we actually do want you. Trained with Collingwood, and then they kind of let him go. Trained with Carlton for one day, and Collingwood's like, oh, we want you back, and then signed him. So a little bit funny there, but it does open the door for Cowan, who was one of the highest rated Supercoach scorers in the juniors. I think he was second or third, not far behind Ashcroft, because he was take kickouts for the junior team, right? So take kickouts and would just be elite, take it on, good kick, the rest of it. Scored highly. So he's someone in a keeper league I'm definitely looking to maybe steal late, because I don't know if too many people are aware of him. Moving in, so I haven't changed too much as far as the midfield few. So I've gone Clayton Oliver, Lockie Neal, and I've gone Bontempelli. So this has changed a little bit. I think I was going about 4 deep before, and then maybe Green. I've called on Tuke Miller, and the reason is that I had a look through. They have a fairly tough first 10 or 11 rounds. They play harder teams at home. And when I look through his stats, so he averages 111 away, 0.9 away from home, and 128.7 at home. But then he also averages 115 in losses and 126 in wins. So yes, I think Gold Coast will probably win more games, but then you have Anderson and Rowell coming up, so are they going to take a little bit of the heat off him? But then again, you're playing like Sydney, Geelong, and these other teams at home where you probably lose. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at it going, okay, well, they play quite a few away. I think they play 6 of the first 10 away. And they're also playing some hard teams at home. So that's kind of a double whammy for me, which is why I'm kind of passing on Tuke Miller at this point. Clary still hasn't left my side. Abs Magic, mate, you got to get him on. Someone, who are you making captain? Now, let's not forget, I was number one on Twitter as far as all those people that have a Supercoach page, and I had a very, very, very high captaincy conversion rate all last year, and again, double points. So I wonder, if you don't have Clary, who are you making captain each week? Who are you making VC each week, and why are you rolling that dice? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that for the last 3 years, Clary has gone for 51% of his games, 120 or more, and 32% of those games are 135 or more, which means that once out of every 2 weeks, he's getting you a captain score out of 120, right? And once every 3 weeks, he's actually getting you a 135, which is an even better captain score, like 135 or more. It's a no-brainer. There is no one that has the conversion rate of him with a high ceiling and a low floor, like a high floor that Clary does. And I think if you going into it going, oh, he's dropped one poor game, like the only game he does really bad each year has been early. If you're running that gauntlet, I don't know if you're going to afford him if he starts firing off, and he's still young enough to find a new level. So Clayton Oliver for me. Not worried about the fact he had a bit of a late start. Had hand surgery to kind of tie up his other surgery from previously. So that's the Clayton Oliver train. For me, Bonds, let's go with Green. Green's a big one. Now starting to get some real CBAs. On the GWS podcast, which will get released in a second, he had the lowest, I think, out of any midfielder. So the highest CBAs for his team, but the lowest so he had like 47% CBAs, and he was the highest in his team. Now, every other team had somebody, their main midfielder was more like your 70s or 80% CBAs. GWS's highest CBA player was Green at 47%, around that. So there's so much growth and scope, especially with those that are now out. Killed it in the match sim. The big beast, kind of like a Paddy Cripps, except cheap. I expect him to be my M8 for the season, and he's my M4. And the reason he's my M4 is, so Hopper is going in after that. Now, some really weird conversation about Hopper this week. Like, people are concerned he was missing games. He was being managed and has been for most of the preseason. They came out and said, hey, once a week, we're just going to give him a lighter load and manage him once a week, which isn't unusual. Dion Presti has been managed twice a week for his whole career since he kind of butchered his body. So it's nothing unusual. They take care of him once a week because of the year he had last year. And I imagine that once they start getting into some preseason games, things will ramp up. And I am not concerned at all about him. Now, a different one is Sheed. Now, Sheed is a very open selection in my team at this current point in time, and I've kind of gone for a little bit more mid-price mix and trying to be aggressive with the trades, particularly from round sort of 6 to 12, and trying to use those boosts and to convert as many of these mid-prices as possible to premiums. And the other thing that I found is, because last year what I started with is I actually started with more of the expensive rookies, and I kept a little bit of buffer cash, which I don't normally do, but I wasn't sold on heaps of the rookies, so I thought, okay, well, I'll go some of the expensive ones because it's easier to go expensive down and then shift some cash around and make some moves from that. Sometimes when you leave yourself really thin, like this team, which I have $0, it makes it hard for you to kind of actually make corrections or trades and see what happens. So that's kind of the theory behind it, and it is different to previous years because, again, the sub-rules come in, so some of these rookies will probably get screwed. So those mid-prices can generate you a better score. You have less rookies that you're reliant on, and if they get subbed, etc., they're not on field and stalling your cash gen. You have the trade boost and the extra trade as well, which we saw last year helped people be really aggressive early and try and flip and trade. I'd much rather go one down, one up with the rookie. I'm going to call it a rookie crisis because it's already looking pretty thin. And yes, some people pop up along the way and they have the SPP and people come in maybe later in the year, but realistically speaking, who am I going to downgrade to? There's a couple of players maybe, and I know some bop up, but I'd rather be going one down, one up to a premium than trying to find two rookies down that are still going to play and still going to generate me money and then go one up on a rookie that's probably peaked in price. There are three things that I think are really, really highly variable at this point in time, and I don't know if I want that to be the biggest situation that I'm facing this year. I'd much rather, risk some players who I think are best 22, which is the biggest decision that I'm trying to make. Find some people that are low in price. Yes, there's risk in it, but again, there's risk in studying expensive players and rookies who might not get a game. So that's that part from there. Sheed could become Collie. I am watching him. Sheed definitely looks like he's in that main mix of CBA. It was Sheed, it was Kelly, it was Yo in the first one, and I think Cully was in the next mix, or possibly sometimes when Yo's in defence, he's in the first CBA midfield there. So I am looking at those two particularly in my team. Now, she can become him, it can become Callahan, and I am looking at a few of those others around that price to see if I can save some money. And I'm kind of trying to go fairly deep in this line to have then Ashcroft and Will Phillips. So that hasn't changed at all. And then the other one I am going for is the Hewitt. Now, Hewitt, I'm not too fussed, Elijah Hewitt, if he's on field. Some people get really fussy because he did play like high half forward, might get up the field a little bit, so it's not the best role. Still a forward, high half forward, I guess, for, he's best 22 at this current point in time, so it is not too bad. But I'm not sure if I want to rely on him to be on field yet. But you could have a lot worse things. If they're playing, And I also think Johnson is best 22, so I'm not too fussed if Hewitt is on field because at least I have Johnson as that backup. Now, the other one is, so Sin here, it could be Chesa or someone else to free up Jinby if for some midfield cover if I need to. So say Weedle's killing it, then Jinby could go midfield, Weedle can go on field, and then it gives me a bit of flexibility. But I'll go with Sin for this current point in time. I'm going for, and I've tossed up a little bit, Cameron's cooled for me in the midfield. And the reason why, it's not really because of Cox. Like, I was hoping Cox wouldn't really get a big piece of it, and maybe that McStay might get some ruck time, and Cameron's ruck can go up a little bit, so there's some natural growth, maybe another preseason under his belt as the number one. Did have a bit of a tweak, I think a hamstring, a couple of weeks, he's now joining back into it. But also, I think that Sidebottom and a couple others have said, they really rate what Cox is doing, so it makes me a little bit concerned. Now, Cameron still scored well when Cox had quite a lot of hit-outs and the rest of it, but now you've got McStay also in the forward line with Cameron and some others, so maybe they rest Cameron more, maybe they don't go to Cameron as much when he's in the forward line, and it is an issue because Cox on his day can really towel up, and that's what people usually use towels for, isn't it, for Cox? So I'm looking at kind of English. I'm also looking at Grundy, and the reason is for Grundy, if he starts forward and Gawn's in there, he might get DPP, and I'd much rather Grundy as a DPP or a Gawn as a DPP than Cameron. So what I don't want is round 6 or round 12, all of a sudden there's a better ruck forward, and now I've just got the third best or whatever. And a guy who might be halfway between a premium, he's scoring you well enough so that you kind of have other issues or other upgrades, but then he's still going to lose you points every single week because he's not quite the premium you wanted. And that's my issue with Cameron. So Grundy, though, I don't think he's really had much of a setback this preseason, and I could be wrong. But if he's fit and he's lean, I think Max Gawn's already come out again saying that he'll take the back seat. I think Gawn will probably go behind the ball a bit more. I really want to see how it's flipped. But so that's it for me. English, I'm having English there just because if he gets over that little abductor issue with Lob in that forward line, I still see him as a really high scorer, someone who I think actually probably has some value and can go sort of 115 plus. And I don't think that's too unreasonable, especially if he keeps playing with without Steph now. So he could definitely go really well. But if I do have them in this team setup, I was looking at actually Radaglia playing key defender. I think he's best 22. I don't think it matters if Hawkins is out because I think they'll just get Henry into that forward line and back themselves with some speed. And I think Radaglia could be a good option as someone who, at least if they're best 22, which I think he might be, he will score me points each week if I have an injury. If I can free up cash, then it's fine. If obviously English isn't there and Cameron's there, then Radaglia changes because there's no point in having him if I have Cameron, who I'll push forward later anyway. And I've just kind of thrown him in there at this current point in time, just so that way, again, it's easier to start with a little bit more and then change out. Forward line, this has changed a little bit as well. JB from Dr. Supercoach will be really pleased that Connor Rosie's in my side. After I kind of gave everyone a little bit of hell and poked the bear a little bit about Rosie and the rest of it. When we look back through and the CBAs he had in the back end of the year, when he had a certain amount of CBAs, I think it was like 40 to 60%. I think he really got a good range through there. He scored extremely well and averaged a very, very impressive amount. So Butters as well did average well, but I think Rosie, from photos as well, he just looks like he's ready. Sometimes you go gut feel, right? So he said his role will be similar. He tried to be diplomatic, saying, we have lots of great midfielders. The team played better when he was in there. And Butters kind of comes in and gives a nice dynamic as well. Ollie Wines had, I think, knee surgery, and he's only just coming back to training and preseason stuff now, which I think is very concerning. I think they need Butters. I think they need Rosie. And for me, Rosie, I think with that high ceiling and high ownership, 35% owned, I'm not taking that risk with the high ceiling, with the variance. And I think, again, just from aesthetics and looking at him, he looks like he's put on a little bit of size. He looks fit. He went overseas with Boak and did a whole bunch of preseason stuff over there. And we know how Boak trains in America through that series. So I think he's extremely strong there. So yeah, I have to have him in my team. And every time I look at it, I'm trying to, if I can get rid of one of these forwards, it's really painful because, there's just so many good forward options as far as premiums that are cheaper than defense. So that's where we sit. I can't leave out Dunkley, killing it with Neil, just an absolute Rolls Royce. I think he will complement him very well, and he's just fitting in straight away. And again, doing more running because Brisbane have a better midfield. Hey, Dogs fans. The next one that's come into my team is Cornelio. Now, I wasn't sold on Cornelio. Has missed a few games, like not last year, but the year before. And I was like, okay, well, he did well, a little bit of a yo-yo. He went well in the back end of the year as a midfielder, not great as a forward option. But then having a look at the team, and this is on the GWS pod, but you've gone, okay, so they had match sim, right? So all of a sudden, Whitfield's spoken about halfback flank. Ash is now apparently playing halfback flank and trying to use some of that speed and rebound or whatever for halfback flank as well. Now you've got Callum Ward was playing forward and kicked 2 goals. So there's a few people that... And they already got rid of Hopper. They already got rid of Taranto. And now they've just had 3 other players that can run through that midfield playing other positions. So that actually makes it really quite interesting for me. So Green killed it. Callahan went through there. And I think it was pretty much like Green, Kelly, and Cornelio as the 3 mains. And then you have pretty much fresh off the next one would be Callahan. So that's why I'm looking at Callahan. But more importantly, Green, I think, has locked that position. But again, I hate to say it, GWS, right? It's you can't fault him, right? And as when he had over, I have to find the stats. But when he had over, I think it was like 50% CBAs or something rather. He averaged like 108 or something like that. Averaged extremely well, underpriced realistically if he is a 100% midfielder. So I think there's definitely meat on the bone there. So I'm looking at him. And the other one again, so Taranto had really good preseason. Came out and had the intra-club game, so played really well there, linking up with Hopper and stuff like that as well. And, it looks like Dusty and Cochrane playing different roles. Dusty might, through the season, maybe change up and come involved a little bit more, but it's theirs to have. And you don't have to be the best kick in the world when you're kicking to a nice dynamic Richmond forward line. Or if you get stuck, just put it long on Lynch's head. I don't think you'll get outmarked, and I think it kind of fits into their philosophy anyway, the Richmond play style. So that's the different scenario here because now I don't like Zeeble, and I just made a little bet with Chris because I don't think Zeeble's going 90 plus, and Chris is adamant he's going 105, which is absolutely lunacy. But I'm not sold on Fife either. I've had Fife sort of in and out, toying a little bit, highly owned considering. Now, the only benefit is he's probably playing like high half forward, dropped about 10 kilos or definitely dropped some kilos. But then the way he speaks about, trying to learn the craft again and willing to make mistakes and learn what's best, he's kind of moving into that next phase. And I'm not sure he's going to get it right straight away, that next phase. It's still tempting at like low 300K for a Fife type player, but he did also say he had to let go of the Fife he was to become the Fife he will be in the future. And that Fife in the future is a forward player. So he might get some CBAs. I am still tempted if he comes out and actually looks quite clean and the rest of it. And has that mobility through the shoulder, through his body, looking really good, then I might do it because they do have a really soft draw. North Melbourne, West Coast early, he could towel up as a high half forward and still average you 90, and then that kind of comes into play for me to have him in my side. So I am looking at that, but loosely, the next one is I've gone the McLean. I've gotten rid of Bruce. Still not sold on McLean, but again, hoping he gets a game. I think he's probably around that mix. Maybe he'll be bench. I really want to see the season start as far as the practice matches in the next week, end of next week. And again, I'm trying to look at these best 22 players, but I think Bruce playing defense, there's I just don't think there's much room for him. And I think they even just signed Williams to like another contract extension, which makes it hard because they've just, given this other guy who he probably could have maybe taken his spot a gig. And they have quite a lot of marking, rebounding defenders. So I'm not quite sure, especially with Jones in there, whether Bruce is actually best 22 and maybe he'll just be a nice depth player who can go to defense or go to the forward line and cover if there's injuries, which is a really nice skill to have for the Dogs as far as their premiership window. The other one is King. Not completely sold on King. Definitely not sold on Allen. Allen, forward, not playing ruck. Yes, he's looked good and kicked a few goals, but also he's playing West Coast players, so take it with a grain of salt. And also, Darling just went down, I think, with a really bad ankle injury, which means that, for me, Oscar Allen's probably getting the best defender each week now. And for a guy who's only scoring like 55 anyway, doesn't now look as good to me for $200,000. So that's where we're sort of at. I am looking at Flanders a little bit. I was looking at a couple of those other players that I might be able to sort of get around that point. But again, looking at players who are best 22, and that's what I seem to be coming back to. So Sin I've already got there. So I was looking at, what's his name? Combin as a rookie here. So Combin, I think, is best 22. Really impressive. He's been biding his time, so I think it's sort of his now. And Drury as well to round out my team. So that is where we stand. And that's probably a really long team podcast because I'm trying to explain the position and stance on where I'm at. Now, the other team I made, I'll just explain briefly. And some only differences are I'm actually looking at in defence Brayshaw for Melbourne. And the reason is when the last 4 games he had 57% CBAs or more, and he averaged 108 over those last 4 rounds when he had those CBAs. So for me, I thought he brought something different for them. The CBAs carried into, I think, the 2 finals as well. So we did have 2 finals games with those CBAs. So that's a 6-game sample. I think Melbourne liked what he brought. And the other thing is that Lockie Hunter's coming in now, who's a very underrated winger. So you got Hunter and Langdon on each side, right? So Salem's thyroid issue probably still plays, right? You've got Bowie, etc. They don't really need Brayshaw in defence. So last year he played defence because they had injuries, and then he pushed up onto the wing. And now both of those kind of spots, they have people to do a job. And I think that Brayshaw can now probably really benefit and provide in that midfield and provide that different dynamic. And when he does, again, 108 average over those 4 games. So I am looking at him as someone to start instead of Young, instead of Dacos, and someone who I think can go that push that 100 to 105 barrier. And I'm not sure Dacos or Young push 100 to 105, maybe 100. But again, high ownership for guys who might bust out some 70s or 80s. Dacos, if he gets 3 80s, watch everyone jump off, right? Young the same. Young has a high ceiling, but also drops out quite low games as well. So both of those guys need to really improve their floor and improve that consistency in order to actually become that 105 sort of average player. Because again, you're talking about them trying to be the top 6 player in the league. Top 6 to 8 defenders in the whole entire competition, right? And they're quite young, so it's a very, very big task. I think their mouths are bigger than their stomachs. So that's the one consideration for me. And the final thoughts I have, so I think if you're sticking around this long, that's why I only do it once a month. Chris, stopped on these 10-minute bloody every 2-week podcasts. And the other difference I think was then getting rid of obviously Sheed, and I'd be having Brayshaw into that defensive line with Yo, Bowes, Caulfield, McKenna, Weedle, Cowan, Parrish probably instead of Bontempelli is the other one I'm tossing up. Essendon have the softest draw in the competition, and they start off with some of the softest teams in the competition. Now, Parrish, before he got injured, if you take the injury game out, average 115, which still puts him around Bontempelli and McRae's average from last year. But you've got a guy who's 610,000 with the softest draw. I think he's playing absolute pure inside mid. Racked up some real big scores after a slow start last year, like 130s, 140. Has a high ceiling, and I think it could kind of be his. He's young enough with a soft draw, and I'm looking at Bontempelli going, well, yes, I expect Bont to average well over the year, but they have fairly hard games, Bont, and I'm not really sold on Took. I'd like to have, Laird in my team as a VC and C option, but again, that's a lot of money to spend. So I'm looking at Parrish and having Ginnaby in the midfield line for this setup. Grundy Marshall was the other one we spoke about, so that'd be my mix there. And the forward line looks very much the same, except I'd have, instead of Ben King, I'd just be having Drury straight on field, been likened to, I think, Caleb Daniel in that defensive line. The other change was obviously, Gota as well. Now they have Zeebel's playing back, back flank. You've also got Drury's playing in that defensive sort of line there. You had Taron Thomas was meant to be playing defence apparently, but now is on leave, so that's another defender. You've got then Aaron Hall as that sort of other player there. Gota was meant to be a defensive line player. And you've also just picked up a few more, like from Fremantle. So where are all these players playing, right? So I'm not sure on Gota. It does make me a little concerned about Drury, but then again, if Hall's injured, then Drury might be more of that kind of player that they'll go to. I'm not sold on either of them, except the difference is that Drury's only 102,000 and Gota is quite expensive. So the news of Zebul going into defence kind of just killed Gota for me. And yeah, that's pretty much where we stand. So let me know what you're thinking. Let me know if you are similar to me. Again, probably longer than I wanted to talk about these teams, but that's what I'm thinking. Going thin in defence, going fairly decently in the midfield and loading up in that forward line a little bit more. Don't get stuck with these rookies on your bench. Try and work out who's a must-have, who's actually looks best 22, and then start with that. And that's my strategy for now. And let me know, because I think I've got 11 premiums, and I'm going to try and flip and switch as fast and aggressive as I can. Whoever's not firing out of like Yobos, Caulfield, etc., trying to go premium on that. Hopper I'd try and keep. Sheed I'd be trying to get rid of ASAP and trying to get rid of him round 6 or 7 or 8, depending on how he's going, and trying to flip that one. McLean as well, so I'd be trying to kind of convert some of these players to premiums and then try and really launch my attack from that. But that's it from me, yeah. So, look, 70th last year, hoping to go well again this year. Let us know if my strategy is the same as yours. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.